So let's cast our minds back to 2008. Remember that feeling? The whole global financial system, it was teetering right on the edge of collapse. And the solution from the world's central banks? Well, it seemed almost too simple, right? Like something straight out of a movie. The economy's in trouble. Hey, let's just print more money. A lot more. But what if that super simple fix didn't actually fix anything?
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Just flood the system with cash and boom, everything should kick back into gear. But as we've all seen over the last decade or so, it's just not that simple. And that's the big puzzle we're going to try and unpack today. We've got some really fascinating economic research to guide us. So let's get into it.
All right, first things first. Let's set the stage. What really went down after the 2008 crisis hit? Because let me tell you, the response was, it was on a scale we had never, ever seen before. Okay, so as things got worse and worse, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Fed, they basically brought out the big guns. They unleashed this thing called quantitative easing, or QE for short. Now, in plain English, that just means they started creating money out of thin air digitally and used it to buy up a ton of financial assets. We're talking about pumping trillions of dollars straight into the banking system over just a few years.
And look, when I say trillions, the scale of this was just mind-blowing. To put it in perspective, after March 2008, the U.S. monetary base, that's the real foundational money that the Fed controls, it grew by an average of 30% per year. Think about that. It wasn't a trickle, it was a full-on monetary fire hose pointed right at the economy.
But, and this is the big but, here's where the puzzle really starts. Even with all that cash being pumped in, the economy just crawled. The recovery was so sluggish. We didn't see crazy inflation. Growth was weak. It was like the Fed was pouring all this water into a leaky bucket. So the billion-dollar question, or I guess the trillion-dollar question, became, where on earth did all that money go? Okay, so for a while, there was a standard explanation for this puzzle, the go-to theory. You can think of it as the usual suspect in this whole economic mystery. And that usual suspect has a name, the liquidity trap. It's an old idea, actually, from the famous economist John Maynard Keynes. And the basic concept is pretty simple. When interest rates are already scraping the floor, basically at zero, you can't really lower them anymore, right? So the Fed's main tool becomes kind of useless. Why? Because everyone, you, me, big companies, we're all so freaked out about the future that we just hoard cash. We sit on it instead of spending or investing it. So, under this classic view, it's what's called a demand problem. And guess who's to blame? Yep, us, the public. The story goes that we're the ones who are too scared and uncertain to actually use all this new money. The central bank is doing its part, but we're all just clutching our cash like a security blanket. So the whole economy gets, well, trapped. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the usual suspect isn't the real culprit? Well, a fascinating research paper from a couple of economists, João Braz Pinto and João Sousa Andrade, points the finger in a completely different direction. They've got a whole new theory. And their central argument, right here in their own words, is a total game changer. They basically say, hey, wait a minute. The problem isn't that people were hoarding money. It's that the money never even got to them. They call it a banking problem, a fundamental breakdown in the system that's supposed to transform all that Fed money into the money in our bank accounts. So let's just break that down, side by side, because this is key. The alt theory, it's a demand problem. The public is the villain for being too scared. But this new theory, it's a supply problem. The banks are the problem. They were the ones who weren't lending the money out. All that fresh cash just got stuck, sitting in their accounts at the Fed. I love this analogy. It makes it so clear. Think about it like this. The Fed is like a giant reservoir, opening the floodgates and releasing a massive amount of water. That's all the new money. But the commercial banks, they're the city's pipe system. And if those pipes are broken or rusty or just completely clogged, it doesn't matter how much water you release from the reservoir, does it? It's never going to reach the houses. It never gets where it's actually needed. Okay, so that's a great story, a great analogy, but where's the proof, right? A good theory needs cold, hard evidence. And that's exactly what Pinto and Andrade went looking for. They dug into the data to find the smoking gun, the proof that those pipes were truly broken. And to do that, they zeroed in on this really important economic metric called the money multiplier. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's just a measure of how good the banking system is at taking that initial cash from the central bank and multiplying it out into the wider economy through loans. If you have a high money multiplier, it means the financial pipes are flowing freely. A low one, yeah,
That means you've got a serious clog. And here it is. This is the smoking gun. This chart is the centerpiece of their whole argument. Just look at it. For decades before 2008, the US money multiplier is, well, it's pretty stable, pretty predictable. And then look at what happens right after the crisis. It doesn't just dip, it absolutely falls off a cliff. This is the visual proof. The engine that turns Fed money into real economy money didn't just stall, it completely broke down.
And if you want a number to go with that terrifying drop, the authors calculated that by 2013, the money multiplier was a staggering 74% lower than what all the historical data predicted it should be. I mean, 74%. The engine of money creation didn't just slow down, it seized up completely. So, okay, who cares, right? A demand problem, a banking problem, what's the big deal? Well, it's a huge deal, because shifting the blame from the public to the banks, that changes everything about how we should handle the next crisis. So here are the big takeaways. First, the central bank can't do it all alone. It can't just be the hero swooping in to save the day. Its policies are only as effective as the banking system that's supposed to carry them out. It also means that simply printing money, it's not a magic bullet, it's not a cure-all. And maybe most importantly, for the next crisis, maybe the focus shouldn't just be on flooding the system with cash. Maybe it should be about making sure the banks themselves, the pipes, are healthy and clear enough to actually get that cash to where it needs to go. And that leaves us with one last, really important thought. This whole episode taught us that the fundamental machine that creates money, it can break. The puzzle isn't just where did the trillions go anymore. The real puzzle is, how do we rebuild that machine? So the question for all of us now is, how do we fix the pipes before the next fire starts?